Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're taking a closer look at a figure we all think we know. George Washington, the man on the dollar bill, the first president, the general who couldn't tell a lie. But what if I told you the real George Washington was far more complex, ambitious, and even a bit ruthless than the storybook version? Let's peel back the layers of myth and find the man underneath. First, let's talk about that cherry tree story. You know the one. I cannot tell a lie. It's probably the most famous anecdote about him, meant to show his unwavering honesty from a young age. Well, surprise. It's completely made up. The story was invented by an early biographer named Mason Locke Weems, or Parson Weems, years after Washington's death. Weems wanted to create a virtuous, almost saintly, role model for the new nation. So he spiced up his biography with tales that were more inspirational than accurate. The cherry tree story was a brilliant piece of marketing, but it has very little to do with the real person. Now, let's get into his early career. Long before he was a revolutionary hero, Washington was a young, incredibly ambitious British colonial officer. His primary goal, to climb the social and military ladder. In his early 20s, during the French and Indian War, he was eager to prove himself. This ambition led to a pivotal and disastrous moment. In 1754, a young Lieutenant Colonel Washington led a small force into the Ohio Valley. He ambushed a French diplomatic party and a French envoy, Joseph Cowlin de Jumonville, was killed under controversial circumstances. The French claimed it was an unprovoked attack on diplomats. Washington claimed they were spies. This single incident, known as the Jumonville Affair, was the spark that ignited the French by an Indian War, a conflict that eventually spread across the globe and became known as the 7 Years' War. So, the First World War was arguably started by a young overrider, George Washington, trying to make a name for himself. It's a far cry from the wise, cautious leader we often picture. Speaking of his military career, let's talk about the Revolutionary War. We see him as the brilliant general who outsmarted the mighty British Empire. And while his leadership was undeniably crucial, his military record was actually quite mixed. For the first few years of the war, Washington lost more battles than he won. He was driven out of New York, suffered a brutal defeat at Brandywine, and lost the capital city of Philadelphia. His army was constantly on the run, on the verge of collapse. His real genius wasn't necessarily in battlefield tactics, but in something far more important: resilience. He was a master of the strategic retreat. He understood that he didn't need to win every battle. He just needed to keep his army together. His greatest talent was holding the Continental Army together through starvation at Valley Forge, through political infighting, and through crushing defeats. His perseverance, his ability to inspire loyalty and endure hardship, was his true military superpower. That, and a little help from the French, of course. Now, we have to address a difficult and crucial part of Washington's story: his relationship with slavery. This is where the myth of the benevolent founding father truly crumbles. George Washington was a lifelong slave owner. He inherited his first enslaved people at the age of 11 over his lifetime. Hundreds of men, women, and children were held in bondage at his Mount Vernon estate. He was a demanding master who used overseers to enforce harsh labor, and he pursued those who attempted to escape to freedom. While he privately expressed some moral doubts about slavery later in his life, his actions rarely matched his words. He was deeply entangled in the institution, both economically and socially. He profited immensely from the forced labor of others. It's a stark and uncomfortable truth that the man who fought for liberty for some denied it to hundreds under his own control. One of the most revealing stories is that of Ona Judge, a personal attendant to Martha Washington. While the Washingtons were living in Philadelphia, the nation's temporary capital, Ona learned about a Pennsylvania law that could grant her freedom. Fearing she would be given away or sold, she made a daring escape in 1796. Washington was furious. He used his power and influence, placing ads in newspapers and using federal resources to try and recapture her. He saw her escape not as a human being's desperate bid for freedom, but as a theft of his property. Ona Judge successfully eluded him and lived the rest of her life as a free woman in New Hampshire. But Washington never stopped trying to bring her back. This story shows us the deep contradiction at the heart of his life. So, who was the real George Washington? He wasn't a saint. He wasn't a military genius in the traditional sense. He was a fiercely ambitious man, a shrewd political operator, a leader whose greatest strength was his sheer stubbornness, and a slave owner who championed liberty while practicing bondage. He was flawed, complex, and full of contradictions. Acknowledging these truths doesn't diminish his importance. In fact, it makes him more real. It helps us understand that history is made not by perfect heroes, but by complicated human beings. Learning about the real Washington, warts and all, gives us a much richer and more honest understanding of America's founding and the legacy we still grapple with today. What do you think? Does this change how you see George Washington? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. See you next time.